They say you should dress for the job you want, but what they don't tell you is that no matter how sharp your suit is, there will always be people who want to tailor your worth down to a size that fits their comfort zone. I'm Madison Hayes, and this is the story of how my boss tried to erase me from a future I was born to build, and how I came back not just to reclaim my space, but to redesign the game entirely. If you've ever been overlooked, underestimated, or told you don't belong, stick around. This isn't just a story about revenge. This is a story about rising, louder, smarter, and stronger than they ever saw coming. And hey, if you're already feeling this, hit that subscribe button. Because trust me, the best part hasn't even started yet. My name is Madison Hayes. For the past 4 years, I've been working at Summit Analytics, one of the most prestigious management consulting firms in Boston. I joined fresh out of business school with big dreams and bigger ambitions. I was young, eager, and perhaps a little naive about how the corporate world really worked beneath its polished surface. My boss, Victor Reynolds, was what you might call old school. Tall, always impeccably dressed in custom suits, with a commanding presence that filled any room he entered. Victor came from old money and made sure everyone knew it. The way he spoke about his vacation home in the Hamptons, his vintage wine collection, or his golf club memberships, these weren't just casual mentions. They were carefully crafted reminders of a world most of us could only glimpse from the outside. I was good at my job, really good. Client feedback for my projects consistently ranked in the top percentile. I brought in new business. I mentored junior team members. By every measurable metric, I was excelling. But in Victor's eyes, I was missing something crucial: pedigree. I didn't wear designer clothes. I didn't summer in exclusive locations. I couldn't casually reference boarding school experiences or family connections to Fortune 500 CEOs. My competence alone wasn't enough to earn his respect. If you're finding this relatable so far, hit that like button. Sometimes the hardest battles we fight in our careers aren't about our capabilities at all. The situation came to a head last spring. Summit Analytics holds an annual leadership retreat, 3 days of strategy sessions, team building, and luxury accommodations at various high-end destinations. It's partly work, mostly networking, and entirely essential for career advancement at the firm. The retreat was traditionally for senior management, but last year they decided to include high-performing senior associates as well. With my track record, I was a natural choice. Or so I thought. I still remember sitting at my desk that Thursday afternoon when the company-wide email went out announcing the retreat would be held at the renowned Azure Cliffs Resort in Monterey. My heart skipped when I saw the location, not just because of its exclusivity, but because of what it meant to me personally. The email listed all attendees in alphabetical order. I scrolled through, expecting to see my name after Hanson Tyler and before Johnson Rebecca. It wasn't there. I double-checked, thinking it must be a mistake. Then, triple-checked. My name was nowhere to be found. Later that afternoon, I casually approached Victor as he was heading to a meeting. "Victor, I noticed my name wasn't on the retreat list. Was that an oversight?" He barely looked up from his phone. "No oversight, Madison. We had to make some cuts to the invite list. Budget constraints." Budget constraints? For a company that had just announced record profits? I knew immediately that was a lie. "I see," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I just thought, given the clients I've brought in this quarter..." He cut me off. "Let's be real, Madison. The retreat is a high-caliber event. It's about relationships and connections. Some of our biggest clients will be there, and we need people who can..." He paused, looking me up and down. "Relate to them properly." The implication was crystal clear. I didn't fit his image of what high caliber looked like. "Maybe next year," he added, already walking away. "Focus on your client presentations for now. That's where your strengths lie." I stood there, humiliated, as he strode down the hallway. The worst part? Several of my colleagues had witnessed the exchange. I saw the mix of pity and discomfort on their faces before they quickly looked away. I want to pause here and ask you, have you ever been made to feel like you didn't belong somewhere, despite your qualifications and hard work? Drop a comment below. Your story matters, and it helps others feel less alone. That night, I went home and cried. Something I hadn't done over work in years. But they weren't just tears of sadness. They were tears of frustration, of rage, and finally, of resolution. Because Victor Reynolds didn't know something crucial about me. Something that would have made him think twice before dismissing me so casually. The Azure Cliffs Resort. It belonged to my family. My father, Robert Hayes, had built Hayes Hospitality Group from the ground up over 30 years. We now owned 23 luxury resorts across North America, with Azure Cliffs being the crown jewel. Why didn't Victor know this? Simple. I don't use my family name professionally. When I started at Summit Analytics, I made a deliberate choice to succeed on my own merits. I didn't want special treatment, and I certainly didn't want to be known simply as Robert Hayes' daughter. I wanted to prove myself, to know that any success I achieved was truly mine. But after 4 years of proving myself, only to be treated as somehow less worthy than my peers, I'd had enough. It was time to stop hiding who I was, not to gain special privileges, but to challenge the shallow values that had kept me on the outside looking in. That night, after drying my tears, I called my father. We have a close relationship, but I'd never asked him for professional favors before. This conversation was different. "Daddy," I said, my voice still slightly shaky. "Madison, what's wrong, sweetheart?" He could always tell when something was off. I explained the situation, the uninvited, Victor's condescension, the years of subtle exclusion. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "You know," he finally said, "I've been waiting for years for you to let me help you in some way. You've been so determined to make it on your own." "And I still am," I assured him. "But I think it's time for a different approach to dealing with Victor Reynolds and his country club mentality." My father chuckled. "What did you have in mind?" "Well," I said, "Summit is having their retreat at Azure Cliffs next month. I thought it might be nice if the owner's daughter happened to be staying in the presidential villa at the same time." The presidential villa at Azure Cliffs is legendary. 6,000 square feet of oceanfront luxury, complete with a private infinity pool, personal chef, and panoramic views that have graced the covers of travel magazines worldwide. It's usually reserved for visiting dignitaries and celebrities. "Consider it done," my father said without hesitation. "Anything else?" I thought for a moment. "Just make sure the staff knows I am coming, but ask them to be discreet until I say otherwise. I want this to unfold naturally." "Madison," my father said, his voice serious now, "I'm proud of you. Not for finally using your connection to me, but for standing up for yourself. That's all I've ever wanted for you." After hanging up, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Part of me worried I was betraying my own principles by using my family connections. But another part, a stronger part, knew that what I was doing wasn't about taking shortcuts. It was about challenging a toxic culture that valued the wrong things. I spent the next few weeks preparing meticulously. I researched all the clients who would be attending. I developed strategic insights tailored to their specific business challenges. I even prepared a comprehensive proposal for a company-wide mentorship program I'd been conceptualizing for months. If I was going to make a statement, it wouldn't just be about who my father was. It would be about who I was, a capable professional with valuable ideas and the determination to implement them. The Friday before the retreat, Victor called an all-hands meeting to go over final preparations. He stood at the front of the conference room, listing the schedule of events and emphasizing the importance of making a good impression on our clients. "Remember," he said, "each of you represents Summit Analytics. The connections made at this retreat can lead to millions in new business. Dress appropriately, speak intelligently, and above all, demonstrate that you belong in these elite circles." His eyes briefly flickered to me, almost imperceptibly, as if to say, "This is why you're not invited." Little did he know, I'd be there after all. Not as a Summit Analytics associate begging for a seat at the table, but as Madison Hayes, heir to the very empire he was so eager to impress. If you're still with me and enjoying this journey, now would be a great time to hit that like button. Your engagement helps this channel grow, and I'm so grateful for each one of you. The day of the retreat arrived. I packed my bags, including a selection of outfits that were professional but distinctly my own style, not trying to mimic the designer wardrobes of my colleagues. I wanted to be recognized for who I was, not for trying to be someone I wasn't. I drove myself to Azure Cliffs, arriving a few hours before the Summit Analytics contingent was scheduled to check in. As I pulled up to the private entrance of the presidential villa, Jorge, our longtime head of valet services, greeted me with a warm smile. "Miss Hayes, it's been too long." He opened my car door with a flourish. "Jorge," I said, embracing him. "How's Maria? Did your daughter get into UCLA?" His face lit up. "She did. Full scholarship. Thank you for those recommendation letters." "Her grades and community service did the heavy lifting," I insisted. "I just added a personal touch." This was the difference between Victor and me. He saw staff as servants. I saw them as extended family. I'd grown up visiting these resorts, getting to know the people who made them run, from the housekeepers to the groundskeepers to the chefs. They weren't invisible to me. As I settled into the presidential villa, I received a text from my father. "Everything set. Staff briefed. Make me proud, though you already do." I smiled, feeling a surge of confidence. The villa was stunning, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Pacific. A welcome basket waited on the dining table, a bottle of Dom Perignon, fresh strawberries, and a handwritten note from Elena, the general manager. "Welcome home, Madison. The staff is delighted to have a Hayes in residence again." I unpacked, reviewed my notes one final time, and prepared myself mentally for what was to come. This wasn't about petty revenge. It was about challenging a system that judged people based on superficial qualities rather than their character and capabilities. At precisely 3 p.m., I received a text from Zoe, my friend in HR who knew about my plan. "They've arrived. Victor's making a scene about his room not having the right view." I smiled to myself. It was showtime. I changed into a simple but elegant sundress and made my way to the main restaurant terrace, where a welcome reception for Summit Analytics was scheduled. As I approached, I could see my colleagues mingling, drinks in hand, taking in the spectacular ocean view. Victor stood in the center of a small group, gesturing expansively as he told some story that had everyone laughing politely. He hadn't noticed me yet. I took a deep breath and walked onto the terrace. Several staff members nodded respectfully as I passed. Marcus, the bartender who had known me since I was 16, gave me a subtle wink. "Miss Hayes," he said loudly enough for nearby guests to hear, "your usual sparkling water with lime?" I smiled. "Yes, please, Marcus. How's that son of yours doing at Stanford?" "Thriving, thanks to that summer internship at your father's corporate office." I noticed a few of my colleagues turning to look at me, confusion evident on their faces. What was Madison doing here, and why was the bartender treating her like a VIP? Victor, still oblivious to my presence, continued holding court. I decided to let him notice me naturally. This wasn't about creating a scene. It was about waiting for reality to dawn on him organically. I mingled with a few clients I'd worked with previously, who were surprised but pleased to see me. "I thought you weren't attending the retreat," said Janet Harmon, CEO of a healthcare startup we'd helped scale. "Change of plans," I said simply. I wouldn't miss the opportunity to continue our conversation about your expansion strategy. About 15 minutes into the reception, Elena, the general manager, approached me. "Miss Hayes, is everything to your satisfaction in the villa?" "Absolutely perfect, Elena. Thank you for the champagne, though you know I prefer the sparkling water," she smiled. "Old habits. Your father insists we always have Dom Perignon ready for family." At the mention of family, I noticed Victor's head turn sharply in our direction. Our eyes met across the terrace. His expression shifted from confusion to disbelief as he excused himself from his group and made his way toward me. "Madison?" he said, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "What a surprise. I didn't realize you were joining us." Before I could respond, Elena interjected, "Mr. Reynolds, I see you've already connected with Miss Hayes. Wonderful. Her father will be pleased to know you're taking good care of his daughter during her stay." Victor's face went pale. "Her father?" Elena looked confused. "Yes, Robert Hayes, the owner of Azure Cliffs and the entire Hayes Hospitality Group. Surely you knew Madison is a Hayes?" The look on Victor's face was priceless. a mixture of shock, embarrassment, and the dawning realization that he had made a massive miscalculation. For once, he was completely speechless. I decided to rescue him from his discomfort, at least temporarily. "Elena, I'd love to show Mr. Reynolds the new art installation in the East Wing. Would you excuse us?" "Of course, Miss Hayes. Anything you need." As I led Victor away from the group, he finally found his voice. "Madison, I had no idea." I cut him off gently. "No, you didn't. And that's precisely the problem, Victor. You never bothered to look beyond the surface with me or with many of your employees. You've been so focused on what people wear, where they vacation, and who they know that you've missed seeing who they truly are and what they can contribute." He started to protest, but I continued. "I don't want special treatment because of who my father is. I never have. That's why I don't use my family name professionally. What I do want is to be judged on my merits, my ideas, and my work ethic, just like everyone deserves." Victor looked genuinely uncomfortable now. "Madison, if I've misjudged you..." "It's not just about me," I said firmly. "It's about a culture that values pedigree over performance. And starting tomorrow, I'm going to propose some changes that I think will benefit everyone at Summit Analytics, including you." I left him standing there, contemplating my words. As I walked away, I couldn't help but feel a small surge of satisfaction. Not because I'd embarrassed him, but because for the first time I think he actually saw me. That evening, Summit Analytics had scheduled a formal dinner in the resort's private dining room. I arrived intentionally a few minutes late, wanting to make a subtle entrance rather than an ostentatious one. As I approached the dining room, I could hear the pleasant hum of conversation and the tinkling of fine crystal. I paused at the entrance, taking a moment to observe the scene. My colleagues were dressed in their finest, women in cocktail dresses, men in blazers and pressed slacks. Chef Michael spotted me at the door and immediately came over. "Madison, why didn't you tell us you were coming? I would have prepared your favorite dessert." I laughed. "You didn't get my father's memo?" "I did, but you know how I feel about you. You're not just the owner's daughter. You're the little girl who used to sneak into my kitchen asking for cookie dough." Several heads turned at this exchange. I could see the whispers starting, the pieces coming together in people's minds. Michael led me to my seat, which, interestingly enough, was at the head of the table, a spot typically reserved for Victor. Someone had made last-minute adjustments to the seating arrangement. I suspected Elena's hand in this, though I hadn't requested it. Victor was now seated to my right, looking like he'd swallowed something sour. To my left was Catherine Palmer, our chief financial officer, and one of the few executives who had always treated me with genuine respect. "Madison," Catherine whispered as I sat down, "I had no idea about your family. Why keep it a secret?" "Not a secret," I corrected gently. "Just not relevant to my work at Summit. Or so I thought." Dinner progressed with an undercurrent of tension. Victor attempted to regain control of the evening several times, standing to make announcements about the next day's agenda, but it was clear that the dynamic had shifted. People were looking to me now, curious about this new dimension to a colleague they thought they knew. Midway through the main course, one of our biggest clients, Derek Forrester, raised his glass. "I'd like to propose a toast to our hosts at Azure Cliffs, and especially to the Hayes family who have created this magnificent resort. Madison, please extend our gratitude to your father." Everyone raised their glasses, looking at me expectantly. It was time to address the elephant in the room. I stood, smoothing my dress. "Thank you, Derek. I'll certainly pass along your kind words to my father. But since we're on the subject, I'd like to say a few words." The room fell silent. Many of you are probably wondering why I never mentioned my family connection to Hayes Hospitality Group. The answer is simple. I wanted to succeed or fail on my own merits. I wanted my ideas to be judged on their quality, not on who my father is. I took a sip of water before continuing. But over the past few years, I've come to realize that while I was trying to prove myself without family advantages, many of my colleagues were being judged not on their contributions, but on superficial markers of status and privilege. I could see several people shifting uncomfortably in their seats. At Summit Analytics, we pride ourselves on data-driven decision-making. We tell our clients to let the numbers speak, to follow the evidence rather than gut feelings or biases. Yet internally, too often we've allowed unconscious biases about what success looks like to influence who gets opportunities, who gets heard, and who gets valued. Victor cleared his throat, clearly wanting to interrupt, but I continued. Tomorrow, during our strategy session, I'll be presenting a proposal for how we can create a more equitable culture at Summit, one that truly rewards performance and innovation rather than pedigree. I believe this will not only make us a more just organization, but a more competitive one. I raised my glass. To Summit Analytics, not just as it is, but as it could be. There was a moment of silence, and then Catherine started applauding. Others joined in, some enthusiastically, some more reservedly. Victor offered a tight smile and a perfunctory clap. As I sat down, he leaned over and whispered, "Bold move, Madison, but you might want to be careful about airing company laundry in front of clients." I met his gaze steadily. They're not just hearing dirty laundry, Victor. They're witnessing a company willing to evolve. That's actually good business. The rest of the dinner passed in a blur of conversations. Many colleagues approached me, some apologizing for past slights, others expressing admiration for my choice to build my career independently. A few seemed genuinely interested in my ideas for company reform. As the evening wound down, I excused myself and headed back to the presidential villa. The emotional toll of the day had left me exhausted but resolute. Tomorrow would be the real test, moving from revelation to action. Back in the villa, I reviewed my presentation one more time. My proposal included concrete steps, blind review of project ideas, mentorship programs pairing senior leaders with diverse junior staff, and transparency in promotion criteria. Just as I was about to turn in for the night, my phone pinged with a text from my father. "How did it go?" I typed back, "Phase 1 complete. They know who I am now. Tomorrow, they'll know what I stand for." I woke early the next morning, before sunrise. I've always found that the quiet hours of dawn bring clarity. I stepped onto the villa's private terrace, wrapped in a robe, and watched as the first rays of sunlight painted the ocean gold. Today would define not just my future at Summit Analytics, but potentially the culture of the entire organization. I felt the weight of that responsibility, but also a quiet confidence. This wasn't about embarrassing Victor or exacting revenge. It was about creating something better for everyone. After a light breakfast, I dressed in a professional but approachable outfit, a simple blue dress that I'd purchased on sale 3 years ago. No designer labels, no status symbols. Just me, as I'd always been. The morning strategy session was held in the resort's main conference center. As I entered, I noticed the seating had been arranged in a circle, rather than the usual hierarchical rows. Another subtle change I suspected Elena had implemented after learning I was attending. Victor was already there, reviewing notes with our chief strategy officer. He looked up as I entered, nodding curtly. The tension from last night still lingered, but there was something else in his expression now. A wariness, perhaps even a reluctant respect. "Madison," he said as I approached, "you're presenting in the second half of the morning, after the client analysis session." "Thank you, Victor," I replied evenly. "I appreciate the opportunity." He hesitated, then added in a lower voice, "I hope we can find a way forward that works for everyone." Summit Analytics is a successful company with established traditions. I understood the message beneath his words. Don't rock the boat too much. The most successful companies evolve, Victor. That's what keeps them on top. The morning session proceeded as planned. Team members presented analysis of our client portfolio, identifying growth opportunities and challenges. I contributed when appropriate, but mostly I observed the dynamics in the room. Who spoke, who was listened to, whose ideas were built upon. The patterns were exactly as I'd suspected. The same voices dominated, the same perspectives were privileged, and it wasn't just Victor. It was a systemic issue that had become so normalized that most people didn't even notice it anymore. Finally, it was my turn to present. I connected my laptop to the projector and took a deep breath. Good morning, everyone. As you now know, My name is Madison Hayes. I've been with Summit Analytics for 4 years as a senior associate. What many of you learned just yesterday is that I'm also the daughter of Robert Hayes, founder and CEO of Hayes Hospitality Group, which owns this resort and 22 others across North America. I paused, letting that sink. But that's not the most important thing you should know about me. What matters more is that I've consistently delivered top-tier results for our clients. I've brought in new business worth over $15 million in the past 2 years. I've mentored 5 junior associates who have all been promoted ahead of schedule. And I've done all this while being systematically overlooked for advancement opportunities. I clicked to my first slide, a simple chart showing performance metrics for all senior associates with names removed. This graph shows client satisfaction scores, revenue generated, and team effectiveness ratings. The blue bar represents me. The red bars represent colleagues who were promoted to manager while I remained at the associate level. The data speaks for itself. The room was completely silent now. But this isn't about me, I continued. It's about creating a culture at Summit that truly values merit over superficial markers of status. It's about recognizing that diverse perspectives lead to better outcomes for our clients. And ultimately, it's about living up to our own company values of excellence and integrity. For the next 30 minutes, I outlined my proposal for change. It wasn't radical. It was practical, evidence-based, and designed to be implemented in phases to minimize disruption. I emphasized the business case. Companies with more diverse leadership consistently outperform their peers. In conclusion, I said, I'm not asking for special treatment. I never have been. I'm asking for a workplace where everyone is judged on the quality of their work and their ideas, not on their pedigree, their wardrobe, or their social connections. I looked directly at Victor. I believe you want Summit Analytics to be the best it can be. I'm offering a path to get there, one that benefits everyone, including our clients. As I finished, there was a moment of silence. Then Catherine started applauding. Others joined in, some standing. Even some of Victor's closest allies seemed moved by the presentation. Victor himself sat still for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then, slowly, he stood. Madison has given us a lot to think about, he said carefully. Some of her points are worth consideration. I propose we take a short break and then reconvene to discuss potential next steps. It wasn't exactly a ringing endorsement, but it was more than I'd expected. As people filed out for the break, several colleagues approached me with supportive comments. But the person I was most interested in speaking with was Victor himself. I found him on the terrace, staring out at the ocean. Victor, I said, joining him at the railing. Can we talk? He didn't look at me right away. You made some compelling points in there, not all of them flattering to my leadership. It wasn't personal, I assured him. This is about systems, not individuals. He turned to me then, his expression serious. Why now, Madison? Why not come to me privately with these concerns? Would you have listened? I asked gently. Really listened? He had the grace to look slightly abashed. Perhaps not as openly as I should have, but this public approach, it puts me in a difficult position. Sometimes difficult positions lead to the most growth, I said. I'm not trying to undermine you, Victor. I want Summit to be better, for its employees, for its clients, and yes, even for its leadership. He studied me for a long moment. You know, you remind me of myself when I was younger, ambitious, idealistic. I thought I could change things too. What happened? He shrugged. Life. Compromise. The realization that some battles aren't worth fighting. I think this one is, I said firmly. And I think, deep down, you do too. Before he could respond, Catherine joined us on the terrace. The team is reassembling, she said. And Victor, several of the executive committee members want to discuss Madison's proposal immediately. Victor nodded, straightening his shoulders. Let's get back in there then. What followed was one of the most honest conversations I'd ever witnessed at Summit Analytics. People spoke openly about their experiences, both positive and negative, Junior staff members who had never felt comfortable speaking up in executive sessions found their voices. To my surprise, Victor didn't become defensive. He listened. He asked questions. And gradually, I could see him beginning to understand the impact of the culture he had helped create. By the end of the session, we had established a task force to implement changes, with me as co-chair alongside Victor. It wasn't a complete victory, but it was a beginning, a chance to create real change from within. The final day of the retreat was markedly different from what anyone had expected. Instead of the usual golf outings and structured networking events, we held workshop sessions to begin developing our new company values and practices. Victor, to his credit, participated actively. I caught glimpses of a different side to him, someone who, beneath the polished exterior and focus on appearances, genuinely cared about the company he had helped build. During a coffee break, he approached me. "Madison, I owe you an apology. Not just for excluding you from this retreat, but for underestimating you consistently over the years." "Thank you," I said simply. "That means a lot." "I still don't agree with all of your proposals," he admitted, "but I can see the value in many of them. And more importantly, I can see that my own biases have been limiting our company's potential." It was a small acknowledgement, but a significant one from someone like Victor. As the retreat came to a close, I found myself standing once again on the main terrace, watching as my colleagues prepared to depart. Elena joined me, a satisfied smile on her face. "Your father would be proud," she said. "Not because you finally revealed your connection to him, but because you stood up for something important." "I hope so," I replied. "Though I'm not sure he'll be thrilled that I've taken on a reform project that will keep me at Summit rather than joining the family business." Elena laughed. "He's always said you had to find your own path. I think you just did." As my colleagues boarded the shuttle back to the airport, Catherine lingered behind. "You know," she said, "things won't change overnight. There will be resistance, setbacks." "I know," I nodded, "but we've started something important. That's enough for now." In the months that followed, Summit Analytics began to transform. The changes weren't always smooth or easy, but they were real. We implemented blind review processes for project proposals. We created mentorship programs that paired senior leaders with diverse junior staff. We revised our promotion criteria to focus on concrete achievements rather than subjective culture fit assessments. Victor remained CEO, but he became more open to feedback, more willing to consider perspectives different from his own. We didn't always agree, but we developed a mutual respect that made collaboration possible. 6 months after the retreat, I was promoted to director, not because of who my father was, but because my performance metrics made me the obvious choice. The promotion came with an invitation to join the executive committee, where I could continue advocating for the changes we had begun. But the most satisfying moment came nearly a year later, when we held the next annual retreat, this time at a different resort, my choice to avoid any appearance of favoritism. As I looked around the room at the attendees, I saw a noticeably more diverse group than the previous year. People who would have been overlooked before were now being recognized for their contributions. After the first day's sessions, Victor found me on the hotel terrace. "Quite a different group this year," he observed. "Better?" I suggested. "More perspectives, more innovation?" He nodded slowly. "I was skeptical, I'll admit, but our client satisfaction scores are up 12% since implementing your recommendations, and employee retention has improved significantly." "It turns out," I said with a smile, "that judging people on their actual contributions rather than superficial qualities is good for business." "Indeed," he conceded, "though I still maintain that proper attire matters in client meetings." I laughed. "Some battles are for another day." As the sun set on that second retreat, I reflected on my journey. I had started by wanting to prove myself without family advantages, then leveraged those very advantages to create change, and finally found a way to make that change sustainable and meaningful for everyone. The lesson wasn't that I needed to choose between my family identity and my professional one. It was that true merit transcends both privilege and disadvantage, if we create systems that allow it to shine through. If my story has inspired you in any way, please hit that subscribe button. I share new content every week about creating positive change in professional environments, standing up for your worth, and building cultures where everyone can thrive based on their true capabilities. 2 years have now passed since that pivotal retreat at Azure Cliffs. Summit Analytics has become known in our industry not just for our excellent client work, but for our innovative approach to talent development and inclusive leadership. Victor announced his retirement last month. To everyone's surprise, including mine, he recommended me as his successor. The board approved unanimously. At the announcement party, he pulled me aside. "You know, Madison, when you first revealed who you were at that retreat, I thought you were going to use your family connections to push me out. That was never the goal," I told him honestly. "I know that now," he said. "You wanted to fix the system, not just your place in it. That's why you're the right person to lead Summit into the future." Next week, I'll officially become the youngest CEO in Summit Analytics history, and the first woman to hold the position. My father called when he heard the news. "So," he joked, "you're still determined not to join the family business?" "I think I'm exactly where I need to be," I told him, "creating change from within." "That's my girl," he said proudly, "always blazing your own trail." And that's the final lesson I want to share with all of you. Sometimes the path to meaningful change isn't about walking away from broken systems. It's about having the courage to transform them from the inside out. It's about recognizing when to conceal your advantages and when to use them in service of something greater than yourself. Whether you're dealing with workplace discrimination, fighting against biased systems, or simply trying to find your place in a world that doesn't always make room for you, remember this: your story has power, your voice can lead, and your actions can redefine what leadership looks like. If this story resonated with you, don't keep it to yourself. Like, comment, and share your thoughts below. And if you're passionate about transforming systems from the inside out, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss what's next. Change starts with conversation, and we want you in it.